Okay, our first lesson is going to be on a few basic concepts of economics. Alright, the first one specifically is scarcity, which I have on the board as unlimited wants with limited resources. This is the entire backdrop to economics. Economics is just a study in the behavior of people and how they use resources, considering that there is scarcity. We have unlimited wants, we have limited resources. Everything we want is limited. Air is limited, right? Time is limited. Water is even limited. And certainly things like video games are limited, and cars are limited, and oil is limited. And all these things are limited. And since we want things, and they're limited, there is a price and a demand. There's a supply and a demand. So economics is essentially just a study in behavior. And we want to look at this and look how economies work, and the first way we do that is looking at this first graph I want to talk about, and it's called the production possibilities graph. And on this graph, the x and the y axis can be any two goods that are non-related. Okay? For general specific terms, I've put consumer goods and capital goods. So consumer goods on the x, capital goods on the y. But it can be guns and butter, it can be maps and cars, it can be desks and trophies, it can be bullets and sandwiches. It doesn't matter. It just means that on this curve, there are two goods. These two goods represent most goods in America. But essentially, in this economy, there are just these goods. And anywhere along this curve represents where all resources are being used. Everyone's working. We're using as much technology as we possibly have the ability to use. All the machines are turned on. There are no idle resources. All of our stuff is being used. So point B here and point C, while they're on different points on the line, they're still as efficient as we can get. Point B has this many capital goods and this many consumer goods, while point C has fewer capital goods and more consumer goods. But even with that, they're both efficient. They're both producing at this point on the line. If you're inside the curve, say for instance at point A, that means you're not using all of your resources. That means that people might be laid off. That means that some machines are turned off. That means we're not using all of our resources. We're producing somewhere inside the curve. If we're at point D over here, that means we're beyond the curve, and that is a point that you could not sustain over a long term. You cannot keep making point D. We're working more hours than are possible. We cannot sustain this much production in the long run. This doesn't happen very often, and in fact, if you want to put it in historical terms, think about like during World War II, where everyone was working and we were putting out so many goods that we were producing beyond what we thought we could produce. This doesn't happen much, but it is possible. And you can actually expand the curve. So can the curve expand out? It can. The curve can expand out. How do you make the curve go from here to here? Well, there's a couple ways. The first way is through technology. If we get more technology, we can produce things faster. Think about computers, think about the internet, think about robots, that work on making cars and better machines. These are technologies that make us more productive. Another would be essentially productivity. Alright, productivity, actually there is a formula. There are outputs over inputs. So are we putting out divided by what we're putting into it? So if we become more productive, if we start making goods more efficiently, in fact we can make the same amount of goods in less time, that's more productive. Or we can use the same amount of inputs and get an even higher output. Either one of these would expand the curve out to the right. So you can have a technology shift, you can have more productivity. A third one you could have an increase in resources. When you have more resources, do we find a giant amount of oil? Or are we finding resources that we can use to expand our economy? Okay? The last one I want to talk about is population. If America gets more people in our country, then we have the possibility of expanding out our production possibilities curve. Remember, this isn't saying this is good. For instance, you can have a country who's producing on the production possibilities curve, as efficient as possible. Let's say it's a country, let's say it's a Ghana in Africa. They could be producing here at point B. In our production possibilities curve, we might only be here at point A. But our A is still bigger than their point B. So if we get more population, if more people come into America, we have the possibility of producing even more. So we might be here at C and we get immigration, and so our production possibilities curve has gone out. So once all of those immigrants and the ideas and resources are being used, it can go out. Right? Actually, there's one more I didn't talk about, and that is human capital. Human capital is education and training. If we become smarter as a country, then it goes out. If we get more job training, that usually goes back to productivity, right? We become more productive. Human capital is about education and job training, and these are all ways to have us produce more, have the possibility of producing more. Okay? So this is the base graph for an economy. We can look at this graph, and if we're at point A, we can say, all right, well, we're not producing that much. We can be producing more. If we're at point B or C, we can say, okay, our economy is producing goods efficiently, and that's really good. So that is the production possibilities graph, and these are the 5 ways that you can expand out. Technology, productivity, which is outputs over input, increase in resources, population changes, or human capital. All right? And let's look next at opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is essentially the cost in satisfaction or in money or currency of the next best purchase or decision. So for instance, if we wanted to go to 2 movies, right? One of us wanted to go to see The Fighter, and one of us wanted to go see True Grit. Or I wanted to go see either The Fighter or True Grit. So I can see only one of the movies at that time. I can see either Fighter or I can see True Grit. If I decide to go see True Grit, the opportunity cost that I'm giving up is the satisfaction I would have got from going to see the other movie. So if you make a purchase, let's say you decide to buy shoes instead of a pair of jeans, your opportunity cost is what you're giving up, the satisfaction you would have gotten out of those pair of jeans. You're giving up what they would have given you. Okay? And that's satisfaction. So let's talk about how we can actually graph opportunity cost. All right? Okay. So let's go over one more. This is another production possibilities curve. Instead of using consumer and capital goods, we're actually using guns and butter. All right? So guns on the Y and butter on the x-axis. So can you determine, based on this, which points A, B, C, D, E are efficient? Can you determine which points are inefficient? And can you determine which points are beyond efficient? Okay? And if you want to stop it for a second and then make sure you know the answer, stop it. Okay? And obviously the answer is that A is the least efficient, that we're not producing as we can. B, C, and D are on the curve, so they are efficient. They're different points, but they're efficient, and E is inefficient. And how is it that we can actually produce beyond that? Well, we can either have more population, we can have better productivity, we can have an increase in human capital, we can have a technological change, or we can find more resources that would help us produce more. Right? So, again, guns and butter in this economy, the only 2 things they're going to produce is guns and butter. So here, they're producing a ton of butter and no guns. Right here, they're producing a ton of guns and no butter. Anywhere on this curve, they're producing some combination of the 2. But if it's on the curve, all resources are being used. So we can look at this graph and determine how well the economy is producing. Okay? You can also use this to figure out the opportunity cost. You can actually graph opportunity cost. Okay? So on this curve, we have cars on the y-axis and maps on the x-axis. All right? Actually, I'll speed it up so you can see it a little better. So, yeah. So on the y, you can see you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 cars, or 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, or 700 maps. Okay? So let's say here at point A. At point A, we're producing 5 cars and 200 maps. Okay? So we've produced 5 cars and 200 maps. At point B, right here, we're producing 2 cars or 500 maps. Okay? Both are efficient, but they're efficient producing different amounts of goods. So the question is, if we go from A to B, okay, if we decide to go from 5 cars and 200 maps to 2 cars and 500 maps, how much are we giving up? What is our opportunity cost from changing our decision or our output from A to B? Because it can be outputs or decisions, whatever. So if we're at 200 and we go to 500, what is our opportunity cost in terms of cars? So how many cars are we giving up to go from point A to point B? Well, at point A, we're at 5 cars, right? Because you go to this point all the way over here, and you're at 200 maps. And now we're at 500 maps. So going from 200 to 500, now we only are producing 2 cars. We're producing 5 cars, now we're producing 2. So the opportunity cost is 3 cars. We're giving up producing 3 cars so we can produce 300 more maps. Okay? So the opportunity cost, we can do another one if you like, and since no one's really here, I guess you really can't object to it. Let's say we're here at point C. Okay? Point C has 4 cars and 300 maps. Okay? And let's say we want to go here to point D. Point D has 1 car and 600 maps. Alright? So if we want to go from point C to point D, how many cars are we having to give up? Alright, so do it at home or pause it, and I'll go ahead and work it out for you if you haven't done paused. So we went from 4 cars, right? 4 cars, point C, to 1 car at point D. So again, we're giving up 3 cars. Does that make sense? So you can do it the other way too. You can go from point B to point A or point C to point A, and in that point you'd actually be giving up maps. You'd be getting more cars, but you'd be giving up maps. If you went from point C to point A, you'd be going from 4 cars and 300 maps, right? That's point C. And point A is 5 cars and 200 maps. So to get 1 more car, how many maps are we giving up? Well, we were at 300 maps, and now we're at 200 maps. So what we've done is we've given up 100 maps to gain 1 car. So the opportunity cost of gaining 1 car is 100 maps. So we've talked about production possibilities curve, what it means, how it changes, what scarcity is, and how that how that involves economics and the behavior of economic decision making, and we've been able to graph opportunity cost. Okay.